Right now, off the coast of Peru, a fish you have probably never thought about is being pulled out of the ocean at a rate of roughly 4 tons every second. It is 3 inches long. It lives for about 2 years. It eats plankton. And over the next 6 to 8 weeks, almost 700 boats are going to chase nearly 2 million tons of it before a government clock runs out and the season slams shut. This is not a quirky food story. This is the largest single-species fishery on Earth. It feeds the salmon on supermarket shelves in London and the shrimp in restaurants in Tokyo. It employs 250,000 people. It moves close to $1 billion in foreign exchange in the span of one short window every year, and it operates almost entirely out of view. The captains running these boats are watching their sonar screens like traders watch a falling market. They know the quota was cut by 36% this year. They know the ocean is warming. They know there might not be another season like this one for a long time. So they are working fast. They have to. Peru sits in the tropics. The coastal city of Lima is about as close to the equator as Hawaii. By all rights, the water off its shore should be warm, blue, and mostly empty, the way most tropical seas are. But it isn't. The water off the Peruvian coast can drop to around 16 degrees Celsius, which is roughly the temperature of an English summer. Walk down to the beach in Lima and the sea will feel cold enough to take your breath away. Something is pumping freezing water into a place that shouldn't have any. That something is called the Humboldt Current. It starts down near the southern tip of Chile, drawn up from the deep ocean near Antarctica, and it flows north along the entire western edge of South America. As it moves up the coast, the wind pushes the surface water away from the shore. Cold water from hundreds of meters down rises to take its place. And that deep water is carrying something extraordinary. It is loaded with nutrients, nitrates, phosphates, silicates, the basic chemistry of life. When that water hits sunlight, it explodes into plankton. The plankton feeds the anchoveta. The anchoveta feeds almost everything else. There are only 4 places on Earth where this happens at this scale. Off California, off Northwest Africa, off Namibia, and here. But the Peruvian system is different. Researchers have calculated that it produces about 10 times more fish biomass than any of the others. The food chain is short, almost embarrassingly short. Sunlight to plankton, plankton to anchoveta. 2 steps, that's it. And the anchoveta multiply with the kind of speed that staggers biologists. A female can lay tens of thousands of eggs. They reach reproductive age in about a year. So when the conditions are right, the schools that gather off the coast can stretch for miles, packed so tight that a single set of a net can pull up hundreds of tons in one go. For most of human history, nobody bothered. The Inca knew about the anchoveta. Coastal communities ate them. The seabirds living on guano islands off the coast feasted on them. But it wasn't until the 1950s that someone in Peru looked at this miracle and realized you could grind it into powder and sell it to the rest of the world. That powder is called fish meal. And by 1971, Peru was pulling 13 million tons of anchoveta a year out of these waters, more than any single fish catch in recorded history. Then in 1972, the ocean warmed. The current shifted. The plankton died. The anchoveta vanished. The boats came back empty, the canneries shut down, and the city of Chimbote rose in protests so violent they are still remembered today by their own name. Tens of thousands of jobs disappeared in months. The lesson took decades to learn, and Peru is still living with it. Which brings us back to the present. On April 1st of this year, the Peruvian Ministry of Production sent out a statement. The opening of the first 2026 anchovy season in the north-central zone was authorized. The total allowable catch was set at 1,910,000 metric tons, about 1.9 million. That number sounds enormous, and it is. It is projected to generate around $855 million in foreign exchange. It will put more than 47,000 people directly or indirectly back to work. It will move more than 670 fishing vessels, hundreds of trucks, dozens of processing plants, and a supporting industry of mechanics, welders, fuel suppliers, and dock workers that, taken together, employs roughly 250,000 people across the country. But it is also a 36% cut from the same season last year. Last year, the quota was 3 million tons. This year, it is barely two-thirds of that. Scientists at IMARPE, Peru's Marine Research Institute, spent more than a month at sea between February and March surveying the biomass. They counted the fish acoustically, measured the water temperature, looked at the spatial distribution of the schools, and reported back. The number they came back with was worrying enough that the ministry cut the quota by more than 1 million tons. The reason they gave was a forecast for a coastal El Niño, the same kind of warming event that, 50 years ago, almost destroyed this fishery for good. So the men loading their boats in the ports of Chimbote, Chicama, Coixco, and Callao know two things. They have a window, and the window is smaller than usual. The day starts before sunrise. The crew arrives at the dock in pickup trucks and on motorcycles, carrying coolers, waterproofs, and bags of food for whatever stretch they expect to be at sea. A typical industrial anchovy boat in Peru runs between 30 and 40 meters long, with a steel hull, a wheelhouse stacked high with antennas, a hold deep enough to swallow hundreds of tons of fish, and a crew of around 15 to 20 men. Most of them are between 40 and 60. Most of them learned this work from their fathers. Many have never had any other job, and in the next few weeks they will either earn most of their income for the half year or they will go home with almost nothing. By 4 in the morning, the engines are running. The smell, if you've never been to a Peruvian fishing port, is hard to describe to someone who hasn't. Chimbote, the country's main fish meal hub, has been called the smelliest city in Peru, and the local cabbies will tell you with a kind of grim pride that what you're smelling is the smell of money. The factories belch oily smoke that drifts for miles. The water in the harbor is brown. There are sea lions on the breakwaters picking through whatever scraps fall off the boats. Everything is wet, everything is slick, and everything has a film of fish on it that no amount of washing seems to remove. The boats peel out of the harbor one after another. The lights stay on for a while, then dim as the fleet spreads out across the horizon. By dawn, they are anywhere from a few miles to 50 miles offshore. The captain is in the wheelhouse with his eyes on the sonar. This is where the modern anchovy fishery diverges from anything you might imagine when you hear the word fishing. Forget rods and lures and patience. Almost every industrial vessel out here is equipped with high-end Norwegian sonar systems, devices that can scan in a 360-degree sphere around the boat, plotting the size, depth, density, and movement of every school within range. When a captain sees a real school of anchoveta on the screen, he does not see a smudge. He sees a distinct shape, often crescent-shaped or oval, glowing in a color that tells him roughly how dense it is. He can usually estimate the tonnage before he even gets close. The Peruvian fleet has become so effective at this that researchers have started using the boats themselves as scientific instruments. Hundreds of vessels with high-grade sonar moving back and forth across the same stretch of coast every day produce more data on fish distribution than any research ship ever could. When a captain finds a school he likes, the chase begins. The boat circles. The crew assembles on deck. The smaller skiff, a separate boat that lives strapped to the side of the mothership, is lowered into the water. And then the net goes out. The purse seine is the dominant fishing method here, and it is not a small thing. A modern purse seine can be more than a mile long and reach about 600 feet down. Imagine a curtain of fine netting longer than 10 Manhattan blocks, hanging in the water like a wall. The skiff takes one end, the mothership holds the other. They drive in opposite directions around the school, paying out net the whole time, until they meet on the other side and the school is encircled. Then comes the part the name describes. Along the bottom of the net runs a long cable, threaded through metal rings. When the two ends of the net meet, the crew on the mothership winches that cable tight. It cinches the bottom of the net closed, the way a drawstring closes a purse. The school, which moments earlier was swimming freely, suddenly has no floor under it. The net becomes a bag in the water, with hundreds of tons of living fish inside it. The crew then begins to pull the net in. They don't lift the fish out. They can't, because the weight would tear the boat apart. Instead, they draw the net tighter and tighter until the fish are concentrated in the small pocket against the side of the hull. Then a giant pump, basically an industrial vacuum, lowers into the bag and sucks the fish up out of the water and into the boat's hold, hundreds of tons at a time. The water gushes back out through grates. The fish go down into refrigerated tanks. The hold fills. The captain notes the tonnage, and the boat looks for another school. A single set, on a good day, can fill a boat to capacity. A second set might require steaming back to port to unload. The most efficient vessels in this fleet can move 500 tons or more in a single 24-hour run. If you're enjoying this look inside one of the most extraordinary food systems on Earth, hit subscribe. We make a video like this every week, pulling apart the industries most people never think about. When the boat comes home, it does not deliver to a market. It delivers to a factory. The major Peruvian fishing companies, names like Tasa, Copa Inca, Excelmar, Diamante, and Hayduke, operate processing plants strung along the coast. The boats pull up to a dock, and the same kind of pump that loaded the fish onto the boat now unloads them through enormous pipes that snake from the harbor directly into the processing facilities. From the moment a fish is netted to the moment it enters the cookers, the goal is to minimize time. The fresher the catch, the higher the grade of meal. Inside the plants, the fish are steamed, pressed, dried, and ground into powder. The oil that gets squeezed out is collected separately. The powder is fish meal. The oil is fish oil. Both are loaded onto ships and sent to ports thousands of miles away. Almost none of these fish, this colossal harvest, this engine of Peru's economy, is eaten by humans. The vast majority of it, somewhere around 99% of the anchoveta catch in most years, is reduced to meal and oil and shipped to feed other animals. Salmon in Norway, trout in Scotland, shrimp in Vietnam, pigs in China. The fish you buy in a supermarket in Berlin or Boston, the salmon fillet that traveled to your plate from a farm in a Norwegian fjord, was very likely raised on protein that started its life as a school of tiny silver fish off the Peruvian coast. By some estimates, the anchoveta from one country supplies enough fish meal to feed half of all the farmed fish in the world. There is a quiet irony in this that many Peruvians have pointed out for decades. Off the coast of one of the most food-insecure parts of Latin America swims the largest source of wild protein on Earth, and almost all of it is being shipped overseas to fatten the diets of people in wealthier countries. This is the engine, this is the catch, and right now, in 2026, the engine is sputtering. The 36% cut to this year's quota didn't come out of nowhere. The Peruvian fishery has had a brutal few years. The entire first season of 2023 was canceled outright, costing the country an estimated $1.4 billion in lost exports. The second season of 2024 was closed early. Last year was better, but the warning signs are accumulating. The water is warming, the schools are moving. The biomass surveys are coming back smaller than they used to. There is a rule in Peru that the industrial fleet is never allowed to take more than 35% of the observable biomass. At least 65% of the fish must be left in the water to spawn the next generation. That rule is one of the reasons this fishery still exists after 60 years of industrial pressure. But it only works if there is enough biomass left to leave behind. And it only works if the ocean cooperates. When El Niño arrives, it doesn't just reduce the catch, it can rewrite the whole map. The warm tropical waters press in from the north. The upwelling weakens. The plankton crashes. The anchoveta either die or they retreat to wherever the water is still cold enough to find food. Sometimes they dive deeper, out of reach of the surface schools. Sometimes they vanish from the surveys entirely for months at a time. The seabirds starve, the sea lions starve, and the men in the ports stop earning. The captain on the deck in Chimbote knows all of this. He's been through 1997. He's been through 2015. He watched his cousin's boat sit idle for an entire season in 2023. He knows the next few weeks are not just about catching fish. They are about catching fish before the window closes. Within roughly 6 to 8 weeks, if the conditions hold, that 1.9 million ton quota will be filled. Almost every boat in the North Central Fleet will land its share. The processing plants will run 24 hours a day. The trucks will haul meal to the ports of Callao. The container ships will sail for Shanghai, Oslo, and Hamburg. Somewhere in there, the season will end as abruptly as it began. The men will go home, and the ocean will go quiet again until the next survey. This is the rhythm. This is how a small silver fish, barely larger than your finger, ends up powering global aquaculture, feeding salmon farms on the other side of the planet, and structuring the working lives of 250,000 people in a country most of its customers will never visit. The strangest part is how invisible the whole system is. It doesn't attract glamour or celebrities or documentary crews. The fishermen leaving the harbor at 4 in the morning don't have podcasts. The captain watching the green screen for ghosts has never been profiled in a magazine. But what they pull out of the water in the next few weeks will feed more animals, generate more dollars, and shape more global supply chains than most industries you've actually heard of. It is, by any honest measure, one of the most important fisheries on Earth. It might also be one of the most fragile. Here is the question I want to leave you with. If the bulk of the world's most abundant fish, caught off the coast of a country where many people still struggle to afford protein, is being ground into powder and shipped overseas to feed farmed salmon for richer countries, is that a success story, or is it something else? Tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you think.